La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
Get out the matrix and live.
You know what day it is? Inner Wealth Podcast. Meditate and give. So manifest the greater this. And things all good cause I say it is. Invest in your inner wealth. Real generational wealth is mental health. It's an inside game, no toxicity. Let's talk and more listening. Ladies and gentlemen, and now introducing David McCullar, founder of Inception, the first mental health gym.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
Get out the matrix and live.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Inner Wealth Podcast. Got a very special guest in the building, my mom, who's actually the COO and co-founder of Inception. Hey, Ma, what up, though?
What up, though?
So I went to an event last week, and I spent about pretty much the whole time at that event describing fight, flight, freeze, and the defense patterns and mechanisms to a young lady. And I think that was very powerful for her to hear and listen to. And I thought that, I want to bring you back on, and I want to really dive deeper into our defense mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
Typically people categorize Inception as the first mental health gym. We categorize it as that, and in the show as a mental health show. Why is mental health so mental?
Because it's very important as a part of our being. We have a physical part and a psychological part.
Right. And so that's why I asked that question. Why is it so mental? You said we have a mental part,
Psychological part and a physical part.
Right. But nobody ever really talks about the physical part. Everybody, when you think about mental, if you're going to always point at your head, you aren't going to always thinking about cognitive.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to brain state those years ago, I found out that it wasn't so much about mental and how everyday person thinks about it. It's the brain and the body, the physiology that's really keeping us in these states of protection. So we talk about Stephen Porges. You're familiar with Stephen Porges' work, right? The
Yes.
Polyvago Theory? Because you
Yes.
learned that, and you were working with that with Dr. David Berselli, right?
Yes.
That's parts of it. So we're gonna break down those patterns, fight, flight, freeze, and what that actually is, what it means, what it does to you, and even some ways to start to regulate from them.
Okay.
So first, let's talk about going into fight or flight. Let's talk about in childhood, because I think that's where it's going to be very important for you to kind of start talking about, like, how when we start going into these patterns at a young age, how that impacts our development. So how did you see that in a school setting?
I saw that a lot in a school setting. I saw that there was a lot of neglect and some abuse, and how it affected children cognitively in school. They weren't able to read. In some of the more impoverished areas, children had to repeat like the third grade 3 and 4 times. And one case in particular, this one little boy, he had witnessed a drug raid in his home. And he went underneath the bed. I think his father told him that would be the place that he would hide in case of an incident such as that. And so he was under the bed, and he heard a lot of what was going on. He heard the toilet flushing. He heard glass breaking. He heard a lot of commotion where when they come in with a drug raid, they just take over the home. And so when I worked with him, because he was going on his third time of repeating the third grade, I realized that trauma had seized his brain and he was stuck there. And so when I went through some trauma exercises with him about what he heard, what he saw, what did he smell, what kind of day it was, the one thing that came out for him was that he remembered the toilet flushing.
Mhm.
And, there were several bathroom breaks throughout the day. And so every time the toilet flushed, that triggered him, his body, his
Mhm.
cognitive abilities went back to that place where he remembers being so frightened underneath the bed and hearing the toilet flush. So he would literally go to the bathroom, get triggered, and then be kind of like in a canatotic state in the
Mhm.
classroom where he couldn't be receptive or be present. He was
Mhm.
still present back underneath that bed.
Right.
So his brain pattern was stuck there. And I didn't have trauma release exercises back then, unfortunately. It
Mm.
was more talk, which can re-traumatize you.
Yeah.
So we did some drawing out of it and just trying to get a better understanding and some desensitizing of him going to the bathroom. Something as basic as that can seize a person's body, brain, mind up for years.
Yeah. Well, and we're gonna use that story because that's a good story to base everything off of to be able to explain. So when we talked about the brain, we talked about going into fight, flight, freeze.
Mm-hmm.
He went into a freeze.
Yes.
And so he has a Stephen Porges. There's charts and everything on the internet you can pull up, and you can start seeing different patterns that we go through.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the fight, flight, freeze, and how he's broken it down, he has broken it down not just through flight, flight, freeze, but he calls one the pattern that we're typically in when we're more regulated
Mm-hmm.
is ventrovagal. You've heard of that?
No.
That's what he calls that, ventrovagal, the social engagement. So we're in social engagement. We're open. We're more settled and grounded, and we're not threat to each other. We don't
Okay.
feel it. We don't feel threatening to each other, and you can feel that when you go talk to certain people if they're in
Right.
ventrovagal. First of all,
Yes.
and you're in ventrovagal. That's why we talked about it last week. Certain people you get around, you feel good around because
Right.
that's safety.
Yes.
That's all we're talking about is lack of safety when we talk about these patterns.
Yes.
So ventrovagal, social engagement. And then you start going into the things like mobilization, which is fight, flight. You're going to get out of dodge and run, right?
Or you're going to fight. Or you're going to fight.
Or you're going to fight. And what happens when we go into those patterns is one, your blood pressure is going to go up, heart rate, your adrenaline. For forever, me and my dad will see so many people with their pupils dilated
Right.
because their pupils are bigger because they're trying to take in more information. That's why too I talk about people always ask about things like nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
But my always thought process is if you're in fight, flight, or mobilization, then one thing that happens in that pattern is digestion shuts down.
Right.
So you can be eating all the clean foods you want. You're
Your
not
body is exactly.
absorbing the same.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you're going to a fight flight response, and then that's called mobilization, and then a last ditch effort, which is dorsal vagal, that's the freeze response. That's
And
when
I think of that as there's a predator at my door and I need to play dead.
yeah, that's
You don't need to kill me. I'm already dead.
right. I hit a fly once at Inception, and then I hit it. I
Uh-huh.
swatted at it.
And it played dead.
It played
I
dead.
know flies do that, don't they?
I
They trick
I
you.
scooped them up, put them
Yeah.
outside, and next you know, as soon as I closed the door,
It flew
it flew
away.
away.
I did that with a spider in Inception. I was like, I'm going to get you. It was in the corner. And it withdrew its little arms or whatever they
Mhm.
are. And I like, it rolled up.
Mm.
And I was like, you're dead. And then I looked away and it had left.
It was gone.
It was gone.
Because that's a defense
Right.
mechanism, and we have that same defense mechanism as well. But some of the things that happen when you go into freeze response is your breath changes, eye contact, facial
Yeah.
expressions, your attunement to human voice, obviously heart rate and blood pressure changes as well too. Immune response changes as well. And again, that's the immobilization of fear.
Yeah.
That's I cannot fight.
I remember
I cannot
watching this
run.
movie where a man was he had encountered someone that wanted to kill him, and so the man came into the room with a gun, and so the other man he sat down on the floor, and he became very, very, very still, almost as if you couldn't see him breathing, and
Mm.
he just like went totally within himself, and I guess he thought, well, if you're going to kill me, I'm not going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to freeze out and numb out, and I'm not going to even feel it. And so what happened was the perpetrator left.
Yeah. It's like energetically is something about that too. Where,
Yes.
because even animals in the wild, when a gazelle may do that from a lion is
Mhm.
like, it's dead. It's no fun. The lion wants to,
Struggle.
it wants to grab onto
Yeah.
something and know that it killed its food.
I am a lion.
Right, not just walk by some dead meat.
Yeah.
Now, if it was a hyena or something, then you may be dead. But so, and all these patterns that we're talking about within the Polyvago Theory, and you know, because you read Lee Gertis's book, he talks about it more from the gas, foot on the gas, foot on
Yes.
the brake analogy.
Mhm.
You know, and those are both very similar. You know, mobilization, immobilization, and some people are stuck within foot on the gas, immobilization, get out of dodge, fights, flee, and some people are stuck with their foot on the brake,
Or a
immobilization,
combination.
or a combination of them.
Because, you know, so many times we hear about people that are anxious and depressed. So they
Mm-hmm.
antidepressants, which is like medication that is supposed to address both anxiety and depression.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout the day, you may be going with your foot on the gas and your foot on the pedal,
Mm-hmm.
on the brake.
Yeah.
But some people, their motor operator is anxiety. It's
Yeah.
chronic anxiety, and we talked about it being like a program running in the background of your mind. Like if you think of a computer with a virus and how you have the anxiety program always there. And for some people that are in freeze, their foot is always on the brake and they are very lethargic
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day. You know, their energy is very low. And, you know, you and I both pick up on both.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? Well, I would say the majority of the people I've seen, they're in fight or flight.
Are people coming to Inception?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the black people coming in typically in fight or flight. I've seen some freeze people, but when you have a lot of people who are flying from out of state and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, typically a freeze person is going to have a harder time
Right.
getting their cells together to go. I mean, because
Exactly.
because even as we describe these layers and levels, there's depth within those layers and levels. It's not
Absolutely.
just, oh, you just fight or flight, oh, you just freeze. It's
Right.
like you can be very deep down into freeze. Like these
Yes.
people who go and commit mass suicide, mass murders and stuff like that, when they say, "Oh, that's a mental health issue," it is a mental health issue. First of all, it's a physiological mental health issue, but
Yes.
it is one, and they're deep into freeze because they can't feel anything.
And that is why we have cutters,
Yep.
people that cut. They want to feel something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their anger is so embedded inside of them. They want to have some type of feeling, so they self-harm.
Yeah. And when you start looking at, I believe that when we talk about behavior,
Mm-hmm.
like behavior, you can look at it from the cognitive standpoint, but then when you start looking at it from the nervous system standpoint, you start to see a lot more behavior patterns. From my standpoint, I mean, I'm not a licensed therapist or anything, but just from observing human behavior, I see all of our behavior is highly connected to our nervous system. It's about whether I'm too low, freeze, and I want to come up, or I'm too high, mobilization, and I want to come down. Or if I like being very immobilized and I want to stay up there, or when I want to go further up there, or if I'm very stuck in freeze and I want to go deeper into it, you still may choose a drug or something of that nature to drive you further into it. But when you look at society and what we're trying to do, we're trying to modulate our nervous systems
All the time.
all the time.
With external things,
Mm-hmm.
such as energy drinks, caffeine,
Mm.
sugar,
Yeah.
alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
marijuana,
Mm-hmm.
sex,
Mm-hmm.
food,
Mm-hmm. Buying,
yes,
shopping.
shopping,
Mm-hmm.
right. All of those things we're trying to balance ourselves out, and it's not working.
And all of those things is still just one thing. You can just group them all into one thing. All of it is stimulus.
Right.
It's just what's the cocktail of stimulus is going to help me to balance myself internally. And that's the message that we preach so much at Inception is that one, you're trying to balance yourself out. You're trying to self-soothe. You're trying to find
Right.
peace within yourself. And so we heard that forever, peace within myself, those little statements. And now we're like, no, scientifically, there's some processes you can use
Right.
and that you can find peace within by balancing your nervous system.
Exactly. One thing I did this morning was meditate.
You did what?
I meditated,
Okay. And
Yep.
meditating is a form of what?
going into silence for me and finding peace.
Right. But what does that do?
It
On a physiological level.
It calms my central nervous system.
Yeah. We all trying to get to the same thing. It don't matter what people trying to do, yoga, whatever. You trying to find more of a flow within the system. And if you don't have a proper balance or flow within your system, then you're gonna feel a certain way.
Right.
So that go back to that kid, we used him as the jump off point into these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
When he heard those noises, it threw him back into freeze. And all that, again, what we're talking about is instinctual. You don't even choose it in terms of
Exactly.
your defense mechanisms.
Yeah. On the one hand, it's a wonderful thing that we have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, if we stay in that state, then it's a detriment to us physically and emotionally.
So when you start learning this information and when you're in the school system, when you were in the school system,
Mm-hmm.
how did that change how you viewed the kids?
Oh, I had a great deal of empathy for them, and I knew exactly from a physiological standpoint where they were coming from. For example, when someone was in a state of operating from the base of the brain, the reptilian brain, and we would provide a safe room for them, you know from your experience and your knowledge what that student needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
They need to move from that part of the brain to the neocortex, and that may take a few minutes. It's no reasoning with them at that point. I was at a seminar one time, and the presenter told a story of her someone encountering someone with a gun, and they approached that person aggressively, and that person was shot. So
Wait, say that. So that story, they approach who
they
aggressively?
approached the person with the gun, the student with the gun.
Aggressively?
Yes, they went
Well, why would
after
that
them
make sense?
because then they started operating from the reptilian brain. And I'm saying that to say that when I encountered a student that was operating from that part of the brain, say, for example, a kindergartner who was suffering from separation anxiety, and they start kicking and screaming, and they didn't want their mother to leave. So we would put them in a room, and we would provide a safe presence for them, meaning that we would be there with them. And with all my experience and knowledge, I would emanate peace and have positive eye contact with them when they allowed themselves to look at me. And I would just say, "You're safe. We're going to be okay." And that student would we would try to remove as much as we could from the table or whatever, but they may knock things off the table. They may jump up and scream. And I would say, "It's okay. Do what you need to do. These are the boundaries." And I would say, "No hitting, me. These are some things you can use if you need to jump up and hit something. We may have some Nerf balls or something in there." And we, to make a long story short, we would just allow them to come down from that part of the brain. Anybody else would just would respond from their reptilian brain. It's like two snakes coming at each other. And when you have that type of experience, you say, this person is operating from this part of the brain, and this is what I need to do to help them. And sure enough, they're going to burn out, after about 20 minutes or more. And they're going to shift, and you're going to see that shift. And when you see that shift, you take that opportunity to say, "Are you ready? I have this game here. Are you ready to play this game?" Because then I am using the game to shift them to the neocortex of reason. It could be the whatever game we had, something. They had to move something to shift their brain back.
Right.
As soon as they did that, they would say, "Miss McCullar, I'm good now. I'm fine." And I say, "You sure?" And they would shake my hand, and I give them a puppet to hug. And they would say, "I can go to class now."
How old were these kids?
From 5 to maybe 8.
Oh, okay, because when you say give them puppets to hug, I'm thinking
Yeah,
high
because,
school hugging
no. In
puppets.
school,
Like,
no.
okay.
Let me back up. Everybody wants a hug. And, you have to be careful with that when you're working in the school system with touching students.
Right.
So I had puppets.
Okay.
And everybody loved the puppets. Even the high schoolers loved the puppets.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they want a hug.
So that story again, that's a lot of good framework because we talked about, you said a lot of good things in there. One, we talked about how I explained the first pattern that we like to be in, which is ventral, social engagement. And all that represents, that's safety.
Right.
When people are in these patterns, which mass majority of society are in these patterns, when there's a lack of safety, there's nothing gonna help you bring you there but safety.
That is a wonderful point because that is where we start with safe. We have to feel safe first. And so when I would take a kid in a room, the main thing I'm saying is, you are safe. You're safe here with me. You're safe to be who you need to be right now. And that may be acting like a wild animal, but they could hear you and say and think, well, she said I could be safe. I'm safe and I'm here, but there's still boundaries. You're not going to go jump out the window, and that's part of your safety too. I'm here to keep you safe from yourself if necessary.
Right.
From me and from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting to see a student go from that part of operating from that part of the brain back up to the neocortex. It's amazing. And so we'd walk out the office and they would say, the principal would say, "What did you do to them?" Nothing, but provide a safe environment.
Mm.
So then, like you said, they wanted to go back to their community, their classroom, to be social. They were ready.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the amazing thing is, too, for the older students, we would teach them. This is the part of the brain that you're operating from when you act like that. When you're feeling out of control, when you start to feel, things move around inside of you, you're breathing heavier, it's faster.
Mm-hmm.
Those things you talked about when you go into fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
We would start to teach the students that when you feel these things shift in your body, know that you may start to go into operating out of the reptilian brain, and you can stop that. We called it flip your lid. Don't flip your lid. Don't go back from the neocortex to the base of your brain. Know this. That was very powerful for them to know, because then it didn't seem like it was something that was happening outside of them, to them, that they were doing it themselves. And if they realized they were doing it themselves, they had power over it to stop it before they flipped their lid and start operating from that base of the brain.
So you believe there's power in knowing these patterns from a young age and being
Oh,
taught these things and
absolutely.
how to self-regulate?
Yes.
So why wasn't I taught this in school? Why wasn't? Because when you talk about social work, it seemed like you helped the kids who seemed like they had issues, but every single kid in there had issues. It just maybe wasn't acting out in a certain way, but every single one of them, I'm sure, had some stuff where they need to learn how to regulate their nervous system.
It's about resources. It's
Mhm.
about having people in the school that can educate the population at large. And fortunately, I worked at a school where we addressed the entire student body. I had my special education students, but I also worked with the general education population, which was the school at large. And we went from classroom to classroom teaching this on a regular basis.
And that was Mr. Updale's school?
Yeah,
So
Hope of
how
Detroit.
did
And they still do that.
so he found that out?
No, in the social work department, we bring these things to people's awareness, and we're the ones that instigate, put these on. He just knows I want all my students to have some type of social, emotional support. And so then we bring that, but not only that, but then we educate the teachers about what's happening to the student from a brain standpoint, and that they don't go into fight or flight to address a student that is in fight or flight. The same way you talked about relationships, we were going to bring in relationships. That's the same thing that we would do in a relationship. When you see your loved one go into fight or flight, you don't go into fight or flight to address them.
Right.
And that's how.
But that's an easier statement said, because again, he said you don't go into fight or flight. Remember, these are instinctual. So if there's enough ammo underneath my surface and I'm triggered, your going to the fight or flight triggers my going to fight or flight. Then what can we do at that point? We're both trauma bombing at that point.
Okay, so you said a little while ago that there are degrees.
Mm-hmm.
There are many layers and degrees. And when you become more aware of yourself, again, just like when we taught the students, hey, when you feel in your body a shift and you can tell that your breathing is heavier or it's sped up, or you can feel tenseness, take a step back.
Mm.
the same way in relationships. And that's why relationships don't work when people haven't done the work, because they're both acting like reptiles,
Yeah.
because they're operating from the base of the brain. Someone has to be more self-aware. And so each individual has to get to that point. Otherwise, you'll continue to have that same type of relationship that you have with your children, because children can trigger you as a parent. They can trigger each other as siblings. We see that a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Siblings fighting, even as grown people,
Right.
killing one another, injuring one another. You have that same situation on your job, in your community. How many people died in Chicago? Whole communities are killing one another. They're just all in fight or flight
Or freeze.
or freeze, and no one's taking its awareness. So when you get to that level of awareness that, wait a minute, how am I operating? I'm feeling a shift. You won't want to live in that community anymore.
Right. Well, because if you're coming out of those patterns, what pattern are you going into? Ventral.
Yeah, you're going into a more balanced
social engagement.
Social
so when you're in
engagement.
social engagement, you're looking at that like, man, this is madness.
Right.
I ain't trying to be in this madness.
Right.
Same thing with relational. I'm like, look, your system, and when we used to do brain maps, and I used to look at these people's brain maps, and again, what we saw was fight, flight, freeze. And I would see some people's brain maps. I'm like, man, this nervous system is chaotic.
Right.
And it's chaotic not because something's wrong with them. No, something is right with them when the brain was trying to protect itself from the chaos it was in.
Right.
Let's talk about ACEs, and really because they're both kind of connected. The adverse childhood experiences and fight, flight, freeze, defense mechanisms they're both connected. So can you break down what ACEs is for us?
The adverse childhood experience study came out of the 90s, and I have some notes here I'll review too with you. Came out of the 90s with the Kaiser Permanente group out in California. And they did a longitudinal study, which means a long-term study where their participants were people in their 50s, mostly Caucasian and middle-class people. And they had them fill out a questionnaire. I think it's 10 questions here. And I will just very briefly go over a couple of them. And one of them was that you had a parent that was incarcerated. And for all of these 10 questions, you wrote down yes or no. And then you had a score at the end. So the higher your score meant that it correlated with some mental issues that you would have later on in your life. And what they found is that, let me back up, there were 17,000 residents from San Diego. And they were asked whether they had experienced different types of abuse, neglect, as well as 5 types of dysfunction with their parents. And the study was a link between childhood trauma and the adult onset of chronic diseases, which you were talking about, how it affects our body, right? And they found that 2/3 of the adults in the study had experienced one or more types of adverse childhood experiences. I actually don't know how you can get out of this world without experiencing something, But they had pinpointed 10 questions, and we can share those questions,
But
with people.
isn't it not so much just about if you experience the trauma, but if you've been able to regulate it from it? Because one thing to ask is, have you experienced it? And obviously, it shows you that when they've had these illnesses, these chronic illnesses, if you've had so many, what's the score of ACEs? Like 4 or more? If you had any four or more ACEs, you had what? You developed some type of chronic illness?
Yeah, I'm going to go through that in just a minute. Okay.
So, but that shows you have not been able to regulate from it if you've developed these chronic illnesses.
And that's very important to bring out because most of us haven't.
Right.
And it's affecting us individually in our relationships and how we, in our social gatherings, with our families and in the community. And it's affecting us,
Well, and that correlation, people wouldn't even understand the correlation was happening with COVID and this what we're talking about, childhood trauma. And the reason is because, again, if you're stuck in fight or flight, if you're stuck in freeze, two things that happen is the immune system is suppressed. The immune system is going to use the body's going to use its resources for survival, not for, fighting viruses and internal threats. It's using its resources towards, I'm not going to get my ass beat by my daddy or something like that,
Exactly.
Like, so when you start looking at, first thing they start saying when COVID came around was like, oh, it's affecting people with pre-existing conditions. So if you have a pre-existing condition, well, what is the pre-existing condition? Oh, go look at those chronic illnesses from childhood trauma that your body is still trying to fight off. It's not that your body's trying to fight off. It's just your body's dysregulated and all its resources is all they're not used properly. That's why I tell people come to Inception to get your resources back. Meaning regulate your nervous system and start to get your actual internal resources back so your body's not fighting threats that aren't even in front of you anymore.
Right.
So go ahead and explain the ones you're talking about.
Okay, so it said that a woman having just one adverse childhood experience boosted her risk for depression by 50%. Just one.
So, okay, let's go back into what is one. What is one childhood experience that negatively? What is one? From the questionnaire, what is one?
It could be, did a parent or other adult in the household push, grab, slap, or throw something at you?
That's all of black people. Y'all better not ever tell me y'all ain't never had no trauma, man. Listen.
I mean, that's all of
black people.
The entire world.
I mean, specifically
Wait a
black
minute,
people.
Back up. I did not slap. I'm
not saying me. I'm just saying in general.
I'm gonna push you and say, boy, go somewhere and sit down.
Okay. Read that one again. Say that again.
Did a parent or other adult in the household, often or very often,
okay,
push, grab, slap, or throw something at you?
Okay, so that's
or ever hit you so hard that it made marks where you were injured.
Okay, so that's one. So if you've had that happen, that's go back to this. If you've had that happen, what she just read, then the risk of depression increases by 50%?
Yes.
Okay.
For women with just one.
And you know how many black people are depressed, first of all. So that's one. So what's the next one?
Okay. Here's one. Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special?
Man, if you go ask a lot of black people growing up, they're gonna answer yes to that question.
Did you often feel that no one in your family loved you?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of black people will say yes to that. So what's the next risk from going on 2, 3, 4, 5 adverse yeses?
Now, this is for your mom.
Okay.
Was your mother or caregiver or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? So it's about
just observing.
Yes.
Your mother, because I mean that's a horrific thing to see your mom abused in any way.
And you're a child, and you're vulnerable.
That's a lot of. I would have so much anger.
Right, and
to see that because you
feel powerless.
Let's go back into our chart. our polyvagal chart of freeze, you have a sense of helplessness. At least, unless you fighting that person, if you're
Yeah.
not fighting that person, you're in your body feeling what? Disassociated and immobilized. You can't go do anything.
Okay, quick story. So I had a high school student who his mother had a boyfriend that lived with them. And the boyfriend would abuse the mother. And they would have to go, him and his siblings would have to go outside and stand on the sidewalk while they heard it in the house taking place. Their mother screaming and yelling. And then when it was done, the boyfriend would have them come in the house and clean up.
No, I would go in a house and the boyfriend would be dead.
So I asked him, I said, you have a lot of anger. And I said, I bet you have so much anger that your anger could light up the entire city of Detroit. And he said, no, the entire state of Michigan. That's how much anger he had. He felt powerless because his mother kept this boyfriend around. And then the ultimate happened. She got pregnant by the boyfriend. So he just saw that he had no authority, no choice. He just had to go along with this. And so he just started acting out and doing things that made him feel powerful, which was what? He joined a gang and started terrorizing other people because he couldn't terrorize the boyfriend.
So you joined a gang and you never terrorized, you didn't go back and bring your homies to terrorize that guy?
Yeah, thank you. But you see, he was operating from a child level. You know, he was in high school. This boyfriend had been around for years. So in his mind, he's still little.
Yeah.
You know, so that man to him was still more powerful than him. But sometimes men do grow up and they tell the man of the house, you're never going to lay your hands on my mother again because they've grown taller than, you know, that person or whatever. You're never going to lay your hands on that man again, but on my mother again. But then the mother says, get out.
Right.
I know many instances where the mom put the son out for the boyfriend.
So let's talk about that for a second in terms of people being okay with, like, they've normalized like their lack of safety.
That's a defense that keeps us alive.
The lack of safety, not being safe. Maybe again being in freeze, and you. So again,
normalizing it.
Yeah.
Normalize. It's okay. I stepped over a dead body on my way to school. Oh well, that happens all the time. I heard some gunshots. Okay, I'll just get on the floor. You are normalizing it, but you are not well.
Okay, let's stop there. And then if we keep talking about these layers, I'm telling you, because when you start to really understand this stuff, you can start to look at mental health on a world level. And as a Black person, you should be able to look at mental health on a level when we talk about slavery. Like, you need to be able to decode and see we aren't well collectively.
No.
Because we've been, again, what's the adverse? Read one of those things again from the adverse child effect. What does it say? You talking about one of those questions? And these are white people. First of all, again, these are white people in this study.
Here's one. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs?
Most of our families grew up, they were alcoholics. I mean, we all were.
That's normalized.
Yeah, we normalized that. Like, we are, like, you know, you go slavery, 400 years of oppression. Our people could not be happy. You seeing our people killed, murdered. So you just described something about the kid seeing his mother abused, had to go out on the street. Well, what about us having to see our ancestors beat, maimed, and everything under the sun right? And so now when we say, hey, man, you know what? White folks, you're not going to do this to us no more. And then the black folk tell you, you got to go. Same way how you described it, same how you
Yeah.
just described it,
Mm.
that thing happens like that too. You're trying to, like, we've normalized being
Abused.
abused. And so now the narcissist, the white narcissist system, whatever terms you want to call it, we have Stockholm syndrome with them.
Yes.
They
We love our oppressor.
they can keep doing more and more, but we'll keep asking them to help us too. Can you give us some reparations?
Right.
Like, that'd be great if they did, but I mean, at what point do you gonna keep asking the people who beating your ass to give me something? I'm sorry to say it
Right.
like that, but that's just true. And it just shows you that we're talking about some deep psychological, not just psychological, neurophysiological trauma and programming.
That goes from generation to generation, and you are asking something externally. You're saying, help me. I don't even care if you beat me. I'm looking to you to help me.
Mm.
When you have all the resources within you to help yourself, listen, your body, it knows what to do to help you survive. It knows what to do, to survive like in a traumatic incident, but it also knows how to be in a relaxed state. But we keep fighting that. We don't want to be relaxed. We keep going back into that pattern
Mm-hmm.
because we're stuck there, and we keep looking for something externally outside of us to save us.
And we think we're doing some real work now because we breaking some generational curses because we getting some money now, ma. We getting some money. We getting some crypto. We passing down some real estate.
And what good is having money if you're depressed? If you're an alcoholic and you can't stop drinking, or you're using all the money to do drugs.
Or you raising. So now that too, here's another thing that I've seen, because you may not have an awareness of all of this, but you're going to shield your kids from any type of trauma. They never going to experience trauma in their life. They never going to have to raise a finger. They can do whatever they want to do in their life. So now their nervous system is just as bad as the person who's oppressing you. You've seen some people who we've been oppressed by in their nervous system. And now you got all that generational wealth, and you passed it down to some people who have zero resiliency. We've gone through everything, and we should have a lot of resiliency, but now you passed it down to some people where their nervous system is cotton candy, and you pass down all your generational wealth. And guess what? After you gone, you going right back into the generational curse because they squandered it. How many people we talked about this day? How many people you seen where they passed down the house was big mom them passed down the house and they can't even pay the
light bill.
Can't pay the light bill.
The mortgage. Not even a mortgage. They can't even pay the city taxes. The yearly city taxes in the city of Detroit, and for some homes is only $1,000. Or they can't pay the light bill.
Right.
When they were given a house, because they were given something materialistically, but not something that would really affect them from an innate standpoint, that would help them from their social-emotional standpoint, from the emotional standpoint, I should say.
So
their body is not regulated. Like what you said, the body is not regulated. It's in fight or flight, so they can't pay the light or freeze because they can't pay the light bill because they're too busy. I know this. They're doing drugs in the house. They're trying to regulate their nervous system, and they're focusing on regulating their nervous system through drugs or whatever, and the lights get shut off.
Mm.
That's why they can't keep the house.
Right. That's why I named the podcast Inner Wealth, and people missed it. The inner wealth is about your internal resources. So when you're in fight or flight, again, blood pressure, heart rate, adrenaline, pupils, blood clotting, defense responses, fuel storage decrease, digestion decrease, relational ability decreases, immune response decreases. This is your damn real resources in life. You don't
Yes.
have any other resources outside what's already inside you. Everything else is just a man-made thing.
Right.
It don't even exist.
It's an illusion.
It's an illusion. It don't even exist.
And you just keep chasing after it.
People want to talk about money. Who made money? Who made money? Because money didn't make itself. Money was just a
Right.
concept.
Yes.
Money is a external resources. The internal resource made the external resources. So everything we keep talking about these patterns. We're talking about these patterns because, again, this is where the kingdom is. This is where the riches is. All the internal resources are inside of you. And you have to get back to understand this, to do that work, to free this up to now you got your real resources.
Unlimited, infinite resources are available to you at all times.
Creativity. Your creativity, you can't. Why you think you're smoking so much weed in the studio? Because you can't think. Why you can't think? Why you can't pull down from the consciousness? Because you're stuck.
What about your imagination? Wow, unlimited.
And many people don't have that. But we'll sit and we'll watch all these shows and be entertained by all this external stuff.
And we want to copy. We want to copy what other people are doing. And the big one for me is intuition.
That's a really big one.
I tap into my intuition all the time. Actually, I've been tapping into my intuition the whole time we've been sitting here. Just letting it flow through me to be with you.
Yeah.
Like my intuition is saying, now say this, now say that.
Absolutely.
Now tell that story.
What's the 2 letters of intuition?
N, I-N.
What's the 2 letters of inception?
I-N.
What's the 2 letters of inner wealth?
I-N.
It's all inner. You know, it's inward.
I know some people like, I didn't know that.
Right.
I just had an aha moment.
It's just in. Go
It's
in.
in. It's in.
And now I really take that concept and used to hear those things in spiritual terms. But now I take that like super literal.
Yes. Literally.
Literal. Like all the cells in
in.
your body. Let me talk to my little cells on my body.
Thank you.
You know,
I talk to my vital organs and all my cells a lot. And I say, I love you so much. My heart, my lungs.
it's the only thing that's keeping you alive.
Thank you.
It's the only thing that ever truly
I'm
cared
like,
about you.
I sit down and I be with my inner self.
If there's no such thing, you know, when talking about unconditional love, man, your body unconditionally loves you. Because the amount of
my
crap that we've been
goodness.
putting on it or in it and
Preach, brother,
seeing
preach.
it,
Preach.
like that's the only thing that you can ever truly say that unconditionally loved you.
You are trashing your body with all them Popeyes chicken sandwiches.
Man, they got a line
You
around
are
the corner for that.
trashing your body with all those shows you watch and bombarding yourself with all this stupid stuff that's trying to persuade you, buy me, be like me. I'm happy. No, you're not. You're screwed up. You got issues in your tissues.
Yeah, you got issues. And what was I about to say? Yeah, business wise, like they saying we got shortages, right? These shortages of shipping and stuff like that. I'm like, good. Cause y'all don't need that crap anyway. Cause most of the stuff we buying is garbage. Most of the business stuff out there, I ain't gonna lie to you. And I'm not hating on nobody's stuff, but most of the stuff we come up with, and you've heard me say this before, the market needed to regulate itself because most of the stuff we have is trash. Like you go into a store or whatever, and you go up front, and they situationally put the stuff there so that when you at the checkout line, you can look at all this trash up front to buy this cheap little trash so they can add to their bottom line. Like it's just most of it is trash.
I went to a store the other day. I won't tell you what that store was, but I went to a store the other day and I had $5 off. It gave me $5. And I went to the store and I said, I'm only going to spend $5 because, you know, they bait you to get in, so you'll spend $10. I went exactly to the thing I wanted and walked out. I didn't spend one dime. They gave me $5, and that's what I did. But all that stuff you talked about, it snaked all the way around. I had to go through 3 aisles, 3 sections to get to the cashier to get checked out.
They do that for a reason, because that's gonna increase their
Exactly.
bottom line. But I'm a Jedi. You ain't, I'm a business guy, so you ain't getting over on me with that. Like, ooh, I need a Kit Kat. It's right here. Like, and you know how I know it's all trash? Because guess where it ends up?
In the trash.
In the trash. Go look at our trash landfills, and you're gonna find that most of the stuff that you bought, on all little trinkets and little garbage, is trash.
And incidentally, that's why we don't have paper brochures. We don't want it in the trash. We want you to look at what we have and view it in a way where it's not thrown away. It's not contributing to the landfill.
So I've been living through a lens of my life for the last, I want to say 15 years, and every it gets deeper and deeper. That level, that understanding widens, and it started really honestly, I don't want to say it started, but it deepened when I understood the fight, flight, freeze response. It got so
How it
much
correlated.
because the first time I ever did brain training, I didn't even want a car anymore. I lost the desire for a car.
Oh, don't
And
talk
you-
about
and you-
losing a tap.
And you know how
Desire
that
for it.
is for black men.
I know,
our
like,
whole
that's your
self-esteem used to be
identity.
wrapped up in cars. I
know.
mean, I don't know how it is for them now. I gave my car when I turned my car in. I ain't had a car in it going on 2 years now, so it really ain't there for me.
Right.
So, but that understanding these patterns, really, I think they deepen your relationship. They give you access back, understanding. You start to learn about your true resources internally. You start to look at it from a medical standpoint, understanding that all these chronic health conditions that people have, these are all just defense mechanisms of your body not being able to adapt because you are under siege.
Literally under siege. Bombarded.
And you've been at under siege. Either go back to ask some of these questions for the
It all
adverse
starts in
childhood experience.
childhood.
Yeah. And for black people, it ain't starting our childhood. It started pre-childhood before
Generations
you even came
before.
Here. Yeah.
Right. Generations before.
Right. So the diabetes that run in your family is because really don't nobody run in your family.
Like literally get out and run.
Yeah.
Exercise.
Like epigenetics, because everybody used to think that because this, and sometimes it does run in your family in terms of actual genetics, but when you start looking at Dr. Bruce Lipton's work and epigenetics, is like 10% of stuff is typically genetic.
And I know people that use that as an excuse. Well, it runs in my family, so I can eat what I want to eat because I'm going to get it anyway.
Is that what they think?
Yes.
I'm going to get it anyway, so I might as well just
Yeah, well,
get it.
I don't have anything to do with it.
Right.
People act like powerless. Like I didn't do anything.
Well, there has to be something for us specifically where, because one, we didn't have power for so long that thinking that we have power feels bad. Like believing that we don't have our own personal power. Even when people start to identify their own God power, people are, I ain't got no power. It's all the Lord. It ain't nothing to do with me. It's like
the Lord is in you.
Like, but no,
God is in
no,
you.
no, that's him. That ain't me. I ain't got no power. I'm just so meek. I ain't got nothing.
I thought Jesus said, "My Father and I are one," and my Father and I are one. I have a lot of power. Because where is it?
Right.
If it's not within me, where is it?
And I thought the least amongst you was supposed to do greater.
Yes.
The least. You talking about who's the least? Who is the least of us? The meth head? He's saying the least of you got more. We
all have power within us. But it's too much noise out there that we're paying attention to and not looking inward, and we continually look outward.
But don't you think that this goes back down to the programming though? Because when you're
Of
stuck in these
course.
cycles, what we're saying to a lot of people, again, these patterns are instinctual, and then 98% of your consciousness is subconscious, meaning
Yes.
it's outside of your awareness and your ability. That's why you have to wake up to self. That's why therapy and that everybody talking about therapy is like, well, therapy is about shining a light on your own consciousness so you can see yourself. And once
Right.
you see yourself, that's just half the battle.
Right.
Okay, you see yourself. Now what? If you don't have the ability to self-correct, you just see yourself.
Right. I actually, some years ago, when I started going deeper into that process, I started really looking at how I was programmed.
Mm,
You know, just it was always that thought was, how was I programmed throughout the day when I would get involved in a situation? Well, what was I programmed to think about this? Or what was I programmed to think about myself in this situation?
mm,
And so I had to go back and look at, well, how was I programmed? What did that program do to me, or how did it affect me? And what do I need to change? How I was programmed, is that true? Are those some of those beliefs I have, are they true?
mm,
For one, being a Black person, you know,
mm,
you don't deserve anything. You know, you got to work harder than other people. You know, all those things that kept you down.
mm.
I had to go back and say, that's not true. You know,
Right.
first and foremost, I happen to have brown skin. Okay. So am I going to allow other people to limit me, or is this self-limiting?
Yeah. Because that
So,
does become a self-limiting belief.
yes, because we're told you don't deserve to drink out of the same fountain,
Right.
or you can't stay in the same place. So I had to go deeper and deeper into who am I really?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm none of those things,
Right.
you know? And so I live my life differently. Like, I belong everywhere. I'm a child of God, period. I am God who has manifested a little bit of himself in me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how I try to live my life. So it doesn't matter who comes through the door, I'm still operating from that standpoint, not, um, I need to diminish myself because now I'm around this group of people that's a certain culture that don't feel I deserve to have something or shouldn't be in this restaurant. Or I have found that place within me that transcends beyond what the world says I should be, what I should look like, what I should dress like, what I should act like, what I should have.
So as you look at those, read those questions on that adverse childhood experience, and you can add up your own score, and you had to overcome that score.
Right.
How did you overcome that score?
Becoming more self-aware of knowing, of getting to know the truth that, number one, we've been talking about this now for over 30 minutes. My body went into a state to help me survive. That's a good thing, but I don't have to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You become educated on how your body responds and how that response may still be affecting you to this day,
Right.
but you can come out of that.
Mm.
And it's very simple. It's not complicated. We make it complicated because we keep getting distracted from what the truth is. We've said it already many times. The truth is the power is within us. And I'm not talking about an egotistical power. I'm this and I'm that. It's a quiet, peaceful place where you feel good. I call it my sweet spot. You feel good about yourself. It's about you continuously raising your level of awareness about who you really are.
Mm.
So that's how I overcame it. Personal development, keeping my eye on the prize, of wanting to know more and more and more about myself. How many people know about themselves? What do they like about themselves? And I'm not talking about, well, I like my eyebrows or my hair. What do you like about yourself as far as characteristics?
I think people will end up saying what they like about what they've been conditioned to like.
Yeah, or what they have.
Well, again, what you've been conditioned to like.
Yeah.
Because you like something because somebody told you they liked it about you so many times. Like, what have you literally
Yeah.
learned to develop in yourself that you can say, like, for me, I know I like my ability to be by myself.
Me too.
I love that
That
ability
is
about myself.
freedom.
Yeah.
That is true freedom.
Mm.
So just like if you think about in grade school, well, everybody likes this type of, like with men, everybody likes this type of action toy. So I should like that too. For Christmas, I want that type of action toy. You may not even like it. So
Right.
one of the things I realized too, and this is a very key point that I really learned, how does my body feel? And that may take a while for you to go through that. Like for example, David, you may like a certain car, and I'd be like, well, I'm not resonating with that. You know, how do I feel about this thing? I really don't. I saw a movie the other day. It had a really large mansion, and I said, I would never want to live in that house. I don't resonate with that. I don't want all of those rooms. That's kind of scary to me. Too much upkeep.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel?
Right.
You like roller coasters. I hate them. I'm traumatized by roller coasters.
Mm-hmm.
So, but even in your relationships, you go, girl, you know, you left that, you know, or you don't want that, you know, a man that's got a car and a home or whatever, but you don't resonate with him. But you can force yourself to resonate because society says that's what you should want.
Right.
And then you end up being miserable and
Right.
wondering, why aren't you happy?
Mm-hmm.
Or you keep up with the Joneses. You move into
Mhm.
a certain neighborhood because that's status. But what if you want a small little tiny house?
Yeah.
You don't want all of that. What do you resonate with? What do you resonate with? But if your body is in a state of fight or flight,
You can't
how
get to
can
that.
you get to that point of
Mhm.
knowing?
Yeah.
It's seized up trying to regulate being in fight or flight.
Right.
Because you ask so many people, what do you want? They say, I don't know. How do you feel? I don't know.
I used to hear that all the time from the clients. How you feel? I don't know. Like, how don't you know what you feel?
Because they haven't felt in so long.
Right. And the reason why you got this suit is to feel.
Right.
That's the whole thing. It's a sensory suit. It's all about feeling.
So let's talk about that very quickly. People don't want to feel a range of emotion. So they shut down, just like I want to tell our students, my students that I work with. You have a range of emotions. You feel anger. It's letting you know somebody slap your face, you're going to feel angry. Okay, so you may need to do something about that. Remove yourself or whatever you feel you need to do. There's a range of emotions, but we just want to feel happy. We don't want to feel the other emotions, sadness, grief. Oh my gosh, so many people are stuck in their grief mode, unresolved grief. They haven't grieved people that died 30 years ago. They haven't fully let go and grieved that. Trust me, grieve. You're not going to die. You're just going to grieve. And that doesn't feel good, but you need to get through that to get to the other side.
Right.
So you can't just feel happy. You have to feel frustrated, irritated, agitated. All of those things are just a guidepost of what's going on in my life and what do I need to do to change, or do I need to accept this situation I'm in right now? And while I am accepting this, because I've been in situations like that where I've been on jobs where I couldn't leave at that moment and I had to accept it. So guess what? I still did the best job I can do because I was honoring myself. You know, like people going, I don't like this job. I'm just going to do as little as possible. Well, I'm honoring myself of being the best I can be regardless. And then I have it in my mind, but I want to move on. And then I wait for that door to open. And it always did. If you just be patient and you just work with your feelings. So if I have to accept this situation right now, what can I do to buffer this? Because I remember when you were down in Florida and you were working at that horrible job.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember that. So I said, well, what can you do to balance that out? Because you have to work to eat and to pay your rent. So what are some things you can do after work in the meantime to provide some relief from that until the next opportunity comes?
Mm-hmm.
That's been my tactic.
Right.
And it's always worked. Because what you resist persists.
Right.
You being in a state of resistance, I hate this, and going through all of that, you can have a pity party. I'm going to even allow yourself to have a pity party for 5 minutes. I'm going to have a pity party. I hate this situation, blah, 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 blah. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to move on because the key is to feel good. Always move towards the state of, I want to feel better, but I want to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So at the present moment, I can't change this situation. What can I do to feel better? I had written on a card affirmations. I read my affirmations. Or sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. So I also wrote on my card some things that I need to do to bring myself out of that. You know, for me, it would be, I'm a find a word person. Put my mind on something else. Put your mind on something else. Go exercise. Move yourself around so that physiologically you can come out of that state.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you can't leave the situation, find out what you can do to buffer it, but keep your eye on the prize of, but a change is going to come because I want it to, and that's my intention, and I'm putting that out there, and I'm going to be ready for when it comes. When you're in a state of fight or flight, you can have all the opportunities in the world facing you, but you can't see them because you're tensed up.
Well, your neocortex is shut down.
Your neocortex you're always in flight.
Yeah. Yeah, you won't see opportunity, you're gonna just see threat.
Right.
Even if it's the best thing that can ever happen to you. And they call that Peter Levine calls that coupling. So you have people who are they've coupled, you know, things that should seem like it's dangerous, you're running towards. And the things that seem like they're safe, you running away from. You know, and that's how the brain starts to couple things incorrectly. And people do that all the times. You see it in relationships. People, you know, women or men running towards the wrong type of partner. You should be running towards safety, but you can't run towards safety. You have to become safety.
Right.
You have to become your own safety.
So if you're in a state of fight or flight, that's an energy that you are emitting.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? You're going to attract.
You're going to attract that energy.
You're going to attract that energy.
And you may attract that energy. You typically, those fight or flight people attracted the freezy energy.
Yeah, they can.
Because it keeps them, you know, they get to pour out that energy on that person. That person just absorbs it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So I've seen that in relationships. So, well, that's the overall theme of this whole podcast is understanding, again, our patterns, understanding how they affect us, understanding the health implications of them, understanding just the overall life theme of it.
Right.
Like, I just look at all these things now. It's just, this is one big algorithm that we're looking at. All these patterns, you could just keep breaking down pattern after pattern. This pattern creates this, and this creates that, and this does this, and this does that. And if you can have that awareness and see these patterns, and you start to be like Neo on the Matrix, when he starts seeing all the code.
Yes.
When he starts seeing all the code and seeing it for what it was, he was able to start to break the code So he went from dodging bullets to just understanding
yes.
that they weren't even bullets to begin with.
That's right.
And that's where a lot of our threats now in society, they're not even real threats.
They're not even real.
They're just perceived threats.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right, till next time, guys.
You've been listening to the Inner Wealth Podcast on EYL.
Get out the matrix and live.
Theme song produced by Be Ready for West Coast Creations. I am Razcast, reminding you to take action, be proactive, be congruent. Get out of the matrix, get your mind right. We've automated mental health at Inception. Join the movement. Inner Wealth Podcast. Inner Wealth Podcast. Inner Wealth Podcast.
Get out the matrix and live.